Hi, everyone. This is Dr. Elaine Gregory, and we are in Accounting 667 Advanced Audit. And we're looking at Chapter 11 today, using information technology for fraud examination and financial forensics. Caveat: I have been involved in these types of audits, but I have not worked with the actual data software programs. I've just been using the output from those data software programs. So when we're thinking about the whole digital environment, we look at the entity-wide IT operations. Then we want to start drilling down into the actual department and functionality of IT operations and take a look at such things such as what data management systems does the company have in place? Is the system regularly maintained? Does the client have a backup system, maybe a cloud system that everything dumps into once every couple of days or once a week? And do they have written contingency plans? What happens if the data system fails? So looking at IT risks and controls, we have to look at all of that, including the hardware that they're using. Are they using outdated hardware that may not be able to keep up with the bandwidth or the memory of some of these IT operations? Do they have the correct and appropriate software? Is the software what we call COTS, and it's an off-the-shelf software that you can just go out and purchase? Is it what we call a legacy system where it is in-house homegrown? Or is it a hybrid system of the two? Now, if you've got just a COTS off-the-shelf system, the advantage to that is that anytime there is any patches or software updates, they easily lay over your system. If you've got a legacy software, there are good things about it in the fact that it's unique to your needs or your company's needs, management's needs. The downside of that is you've got systems people who come and go. And do those systems people who leave enough knowledge of the system that somebody coming in can continue to keep the system in operations? I've seen some that look like they've been put together with twine and paper clips, or instead of going back and restructuring the data code, the company just keeps having people add on to the code. And then you get this monster code out there that no one can understand, no one can follow. And if that code breaks in any place, you've lost your data. And finally, the other risk that you as the auditor really need to look at is who has access to the system, who has access rights in what areas of a system, perhaps what positions or duties. Perhaps it is based on transaction levels. So who has access into the system? Who can see into it? Normally, when we're looking at IT audits and assurance activities, you as the auditor will need to have some type of expertise in the field, or you're going to have to hire out and use the work of specialists. This is a burgeoning area. So hopefully those in the MS programs or MA programs in accounting can start taking and having access to more expertise in the field of IT. There's two kinds of processes the auditor uses today, and I've used both of these to advantages and disadvantages. The first one's called the black box approach, and that's kind of where we don't look at the system itself, but we look at all the users and the policies of the system, the flow charts of the system, and we gain an understanding of how the system should operate. Caveat, you have to have trust in the information you're receiving. So you'll probably have to do some vouching and tracing. You'll have to run some reports on the system to see if those processes, interviews, flowcharts really work. The second one is called the white box approach. And this is a really great approach, but not a lot of companies can use it because there's a cost benefit issue to it. You either take a marked set of data and you run it through the current system and you trace the activity. Or what some companies do, especially when they're doing software upgrades or implementations, they run parallel systems. Excuse me. And that's where you have your normal system operating, and then you have either a test, you probably have a test environment with mocked up or exact replicated data in that system, and then you can throw test transactions within it. Now, I would never recommend using a marked transaction and trying to put it in and let it go out. Once you're in their finance system, and it's really, really difficult to put things in and then try to back things out without showing unusual transaction activity, which could raise red flags for other auditors. So, and when you're thinking about the white box, I think system parallel testing is great, or test environments, what we used to call sandboxes. And some companies leave a very small sandbox there that you can test, new transactions, what if scenarios, issues like that. But they're very expensive to maintain. And if you really want what's going on in the current environment, you've got to keep overlaying new data and new data and new data into it. So it's very costly and time consuming. Now, what these types of audits and assurance activities do for us, though, is it brings us some measure of data integrity, data reliability, and data validity. And it can identify potential issues in policies, company-wide, entity-wide, procedures within IT operations, and maybe systems issues. Now, when we're looking at the 5 original management assertions, remember back in your early years of accounting, you had the 5 assertions: existence, completeness, rights and obligations, valuation and allocation, and presentation and disclosure. Believe me, this will be on your CPA exam. So some of the questions we have to ask ourselves under each of these is, 1, does the evidence exist in the IT system? And is it properly recorded in the system so that it results in the financial statements? Is it complete? Is there anything missing in those transactions? Is there data that's omitted? Are there events or transactions that have been omitted? Is there evidence in the digital system that shows the rights of ownership or the obligations on a liability? Does the evidence provide support for the valuation and allocation? For example, the valuation of fixed assets and the depreciation of those assets. Do we have digital evidence on this? And finally, Is there appropriate and sufficient presentation of the financial statements? Is there enough there along with all the required disclosures? Now, again, as I said, I've not worked in these software programs. I've just used the data that's come out of these software programs in order to do my part of the investigations, because I am not an IT expert in the field. So I use other people to help me get this data to me. There's ways we do it, especially if we're seizing assets such as computers. You want to be very careful and use a forensic specialist in information technology to know how to image data files and storage media, as well as the use of those specialists when it comes to software programs to recover deleted emails and messages and files and restoring data back. Now, there's lots of examples in the text, so I won't go over them. Go ahead and read them yourself. But I did find that the ACFE sells training products, and part of those training products are books. And there's books that the ACFE writes, and there's books that third-party experts write that the ACFE vets out, and then if they accept them, they put them in their library for purchase. And there's an interesting book out there called Cyber Forensics, a Field Manual for Collecting, Examining, and Preserving Evidence of Computer Crimes. This might be an excellent, excellent book if you are interested in that field of forensic and fraud examination. You can also use these types of materials to help you improve your auditing skills. Now, as I've said before, and it's in your class resources, there is a new thing coming down the pipeline called the CPA evolution. I would strongly suggest that if you are going to take your CPA exam after January 1st, 2024, that you understand what the new requirements are. And part of those requirements is an understanding of data analytics. So you may be tested on that, and there may be a need for you to look at your schedule, look at your curriculum, your course schedule, and see if you need to add data analytics into your curriculum. Now, when we think of data analytics, we've got big data analytics, we've got artificial intelligence, and they all serve a really great purpose. The issue is there's a lot of data. So when you are looking at detection and examination in a digital environment, you've got to approach this using specific targets. You need to narrow the focus of what could and or did go wrong and how that could or did present itself in the information system. So you have to understand the industry and the company, the business environment. You have to know and understand IT specific schemes. And you have to understand what resources there are available to help you out. So you kind of have to think like an IT fraudster. I am not an IT fraudster. I would not know the first thing to do about this. That's why I always go to specialists. But here are the steps that one would take. First, you've got to extract the data. The electronic data has to go into some file that you can open. So usually there's an ASCII2 file, we have text files, Access database files, Excel files. However, the data can get extracted into a file and to you, then you can start running through some analysis. One of those analysis programs could be Tableau, it could be Python. There are different products out there if you know how to use them, again, I would go to my data analytic people and I would say, so-and-so is going to send you a file. I need you to upload it into whatever file I need. And then you've got to start running some ways to disaggregate the file, the data. So I can then get the results and start working on it. Now, as I said, you kind of have to think like an IT fraudster. So you have to understand that there are some potential anomalies within those data fields. So you have to take that into consideration. You also have to think about what is the potential scheme that was done. Perhaps it was changing, going in and changing out denied purchase orders to approved purchase orders. It could be it falsified a segregation of duties by imprinting names of other employees within the data process that really weren't involved with the process. So we have to think about what kind of scheme could be done. There was a great bank scheme, back in the early 80s, and it's probably still going on. Somebody figured out how to get into a bank system, the back end of the bank data collection system. And as transactions were going through the financial system of the bank, deposits, checks, but mainly deposits, either ACH wire transfers or other types of deposits, somebody figured out how to go in and scrape a minute amount off that deposit. For example, if the deposit was $48.59, they would scrape 9 cents off of it. And they would put it in a special account. Guess whose account that was? The fraudster's account. And then they, in fact, had that. Then every 24 hours, there was an automatic wire transfer closing, pushing all those little minute cents out into an offshore bank account. It ended up being hundreds of thousands of dollars, but it was millions of transactions. Now, most of the time when people are looking at their bank statements, they really aren't working to the penny. And these were more private accounts than corporate accounts. So a lot of people don't reconcile their bank statement every month. So they go, do I have money in the bank? Cool, I have money in the bank. And because it was really literally millions of transactions, because they were such small dollar amounts, systems weren't able to pick that up. You couldn't audit for that. And if you did audit for that, it would probably come out at the end as probably materially insignificant. It maybe didn't reach the threshold of a material misstatement. So even if it was there, it wasn't too big of a deal. People would look at overs and shortages. Well, if you've got a couple of cents here and there, or $1, look at the cost benefit. Do I really want to reconcile this cash account for $1? No. Over or short? That's that adjusting entry we do. So understand what those schemes could do and how they could be done. You want to do that in that narrow field because, like I said, there's a lot of data in these data analytic programs, and you don't want to get data overload. You don't want to get files of data that you have to spend even more time than you thought sorting through it. So make sure that the focus of the data testing you're doing through your data analytics is narrow enough that you have a sufficient amount of data for your evidence gathering, but it's not so much that it's going to overwhelm you. And you need to know what kind of data you want to disaggregate. You want to have just financial data. Do you want non-financial data, metrics? Do you want to see only a targeted type of transaction and how it flowed through the system? Do you want to look at certain demographics? If you've got a global or regional company that you are looking at, look at different locations. Is there something going on in one geographical location that's not going on in another? What type of business sectors that they have or business products within their company? Now, when you're looking at data analysis software, there's examples of different types of queries by different types of account classifications on page 869 and 870 that you can look at. And there's a list of these types of functions. I only pulled out a few for you to look at. One is, how is it sorting your data? How does it identify, select, and extract that data? How are data files connected to each other? For example, is there a common attribute that's running through different steps within the process that align those files together? Can you perform some correlation or relationship analysis? If and to what extent, when this happens, this is the result. You can do searches for duplicate data, duplicate invoice numbers, and look to see if it's the same company, perhaps a duplicate payment to a company, which could be a kickback fraud. Or it could be a duplicate invoice number, but they just changed the company name and that payment for the exact same thing went someplace else. You also want to be able to use your data extraction and software to perform ratio analysis. Remember, ratio analysis always comes with the caveat. What happened in prior years compared to the year you're looking at, as well as looking at environmental or changes in the business industry or business sector that could have affected the data for this year. Now, this is the part I like. I like throwing information into graphic software and seeing what comes out. And I'm a visual person. And I think when you are using this, it can become an extremely powerful tool to visualize a fraud scheme. So you could use organization charts, which link people, perpetrators, organized crime syndicates. You can use these charts and graphs to link to illustrate the flow of a fraudulent situation. You could look at timelines. You can do pictures, flow charts, whatever. Those are very powerful tools, and they're great for communicating often complex information that comes out in frauds. You can also use these softwares to throw out preliminary visualizations. So you look at it and can see where maybe your information or your evidence is weaker in one area than another. So you can dive more into that area that's weak, or if there's missing pieces, missing links. We see a process that goes A, B, C, D, G. So we've got to find out what happened between E and G, which may show fraudulent schemes occurring. So you could see what the evidence is telling you and what may still be missing or may be intentionally omitted. And finally, these visualizations, like I've said, they're often used in front of juries and they're extremely powerful, but you need to be sure that the communication is written for that audience. So know who your audience is. Prosecutors will get it a lot faster than juries will. So as you are thinking about your visualizations, think about who's going to look at it and what are they going to perceive by looking at it. Now, I'm only touching on this, as I said, that the text provides several suggestions on case management software, Analyst Notebook, LexisNexis, and the benefits are that it may make complex schemes easier to follow. Some investment schemes are extremely challenging because of how perhaps the money is moved or laundered. So it might make these schemes a little bit easier for not only you, but whoever you are communicating to follow. Sometimes these software programs can also step in and do some compliance work regarding the internal control structure or management's assertions with regard to areas such as SOX. It can dissect complex financial statements. I've seen some financial statements that are so huge that I have to break them down into small chunks. Maybe I want to take these financial statements and break down only the assets and separate the assets from the liabilities and the equity. Maybe I want to dive down into the equity, especially if I've got some financial instruments out there that I may be concerned about. They can also provide assistance if you're looking at organized crime operations or sex and drug trafficking schemes. We've used them in human trafficking cases where we're trying to tie the people together. We're trying to link the different groups together and how a person from one country came into the other and what is happening to those people and how is the money behind the people being laundered through a perhaps legitimate business. So this was a brief overview of the chapter, and if you have any questions, feel free to post them in the class questions for the good of the class. You can do a message through Halo to me, or you can set up a meeting with me in Calendly. Now, caveat, I don't know a lot about IT systems and programs and audits. So I've tried to provide a few other resources for you to help you find additional assistance if either you still have questions or you might be interested in this as a profession. Have a great week. Have a blessed week. And I will see you in the classroom.